Let's continue with our studies of the book of Ruth. Our text this afternoon comes from Ruth chapter 2, verse 17 to 23. Ruth chapter 2, verse 17 to 23. This is the word of the Lord from NIV. So Ruth gleaned the field until evening. Then she threshed the barley she had gathered as it mounted to about an ephah. She carried it back to town, and her mother-in-law saw how much she had gathered. Ruth also brought out and gave her what she had left over after she had eaten enough. Her mother-in-law asked her, where did you glean today? Where did you work? Blessed be the man who took notice of you. Then Ruth told her mother-in-law about one at whose place she had been working. The name of the man I worked with today is Boaz, she said. The Lord bless him. Naomi said to her daughter-in-law, he has not stopped showing his kindness to the living and the dead, she added. That man is our close relative. He's one of the kinsmen redeemers. Then Ruth the Moabite said, he even said to me, stay here with my workers until they finish harvesting all my grain. Naomi said to Ruth, her daughter-in-law, it will be good for you, my daughter, to go with his girls, because in someone else's field you might be harmed. Verse 23, so Ruth stayed close to the servant girls of Boaz to glean until the barley and wheat harvest were finished. And she lived with her mother-in-law. Amen. And last a couple of weeks, we've seen how God was leading and guiding Ruth to the place where God prepared in God's own timing, in his perfect timing, and to the person that God has blessed. And God designated Boaz to be the channel of blessings to Ruth, to repay and to reward her for what she had done. But if you continue to read the book of Ruth, there are three main characters in that book other than God. There's Naomi, Ruth, and Boaz. In today's text, we see the changes in Naomi. At the end of chapter 1, we come across Naomi unable to see the grace of God in her life, saying, do not call me Naomi, but call me Mara, the bitterness. Almighty has made my life very bitter, and the Lord has afflicted me. She was not able to see the grace of God in her life. But in today's text, she begins to see the grace of God once again. Look at verse 19. This is what Naomi says. Bless the man who took notice of you. In verse 20, it says, the Lord bless him. He has not stopped showing his kindness to the living and the dead. Now she speaks of blessings. She speaks of kindness and the grace of God. That is hesed, the love of God. Now we see different Naomi from when she sent off Ruth to glean in the field in the morning to when she saw Ruth in that afternoon, that evening. Naomi is completely different. She wasn't able to see the grace of God in that morning until even when she was sending off Ruth to the field. But that very evening, she affirms and speaks of the blessings and the kindness, the grace of God. Now, how is Naomi able to see the blessings and the grace of God simply in one single day? In today's text, we see Ruth bringing home what she had gleaned for the day, all that she gleaned for the day. And it says it amounted to about an ephah. Now, an ephah is about 22 to 23 liters. Liters, yes. You know, we see often a soda bottle, the large soda bottle. How much is that? That's about 2 liter bottle. Those are 2 liters. Now 22 liters are 11 bottles of the large soda bottles. There's 11 of those large soda bottle of grains. Now just to put it into perspective, in those days, a day wage of a man was about a liter, not even full 2 liters, but a liter worth of grain. So for Ruth to gather the 22 to 23 liters of grain, 22 to 23 times the amount of a man who's working for the whole day, is simply a miracle. It just cannot happen. So when Naomi saw what Ruth brought home, she realized without someone's help, without blessing her, it is impossible to glean that much in one day. It's just impossible. So that's why she asked, "Where did you glean today? Where did you work?" Because she realized it is impossible to bring that much in one single day of gleaning. Because without someone looking out for her, without someone being very generous, it is impossible to glean that much. So Naomi realizes that someone is being merciful, someone is being generous to Ruth on that day. That's why she's asking, "Where'd you work today? In whose field did you work? Who noticed you today?" As far as Naomi is concerned, she's grateful to that someone. She doesn't know yet, but she's grateful for that someone. For Naomi and Ruth had nobody. They had nowhere to turn, and they did not know how to survive in Bethlehem. They desperately needed someone's help. Now, when Naomi said, "Blessed is the man who took notice of you," she does not know Boaz yet. She doesn't know who was generous to Ruth. But nevertheless, she's blessing the somebody. She's being thankful to the somebody who is generous to Ruth. And as we see this Naomi blessing someone, we realize being thankful for this someone, it is very important. We are reminded the importance of being thankful once again. Who are we to thankful? Who are to be thankful to? First of all, it is God. For it is God who leads and who guides. For it is the invisible helping hands of God that helps us. And it is God who places different peoples in our lives that help and that shapes our lives. So that's why we need to be thankful to God first. Then second, we need to be thankful to those who have shown us the mercy and kindness and generosity, the grace. In Luke chapter 17, it's a familiar story of Jesus healing the 10 lepers. All 10 lepers were healed. But as we know, only one leper came back. Only one came back, and that was a Samaritan. Listen to Luke chapter 17, verse 16 and on. And he threw himself at Jesus' feet and thanked him, and he was a Samaritan. Then Jesus said, "Were not all 10 cleansed? Where are the other 9? Verse 18, "Was no one found to return and give praise to God except for this foreigner?" He's looking for those who were healed. I'm sure they were thankful to God. They go, "Lord, look at me. I am all cleansed. Thank you, Lord, for cleansing me. This uncurable, this cursed disease called leprosy. Thank God that we are able to go back to our family and again redo our normal life. But they did not come back to thank the one who healed. They thanked God, but they did not come back to thank Jesus. Those who do not recognize the grace, we call them ungrateful. Those who do not recognize grace, they're ungrateful people. And I've heard this from an unbeliever, speaking about Christians. He says, Christians only thank God. Ooh. He was knocking on Christians for being ungrateful to those who have shown them kindness, who have shown them the generosity. He says Christians are only thankful to God. And why can't they be thankful for someone else? In a few days, will be October. October will be soon, and November will be we're beginning. And November is the month of Thanksgiving. And in this period of time, we need to be thankful. In fact, not only just during this period of time, in our lives, we need to be thankful. We need to be people who are grateful to others. First to God, but also to those who have shown us grace, who are concerned for our well-being, and who encourage and strengthen us, and who are thoughtful and sympathetic toward us. And just a few days ago, I received a phone call from one of my friends. In fact, we went to high school together, went to college together, was my roommate, and he's been calling me a couple times a year, and I call him time to time, a couple times a year. So there's a phone call going back and forth, and he called me out of blue moon. It's out of nowhere, and there was nothing. There was no news, nothing. But he says, just, how you doing? How are you? This is good. How about you? And then we talk about various stuff, and I realized, you know what? I am in his heart. He's thinking about me. He's thinking about me. And I appreciated that. And I said, thanks. Thanks for your call. We need to be thankful time to time for those who encourage and strengthen us, for those who are thoughtful and sympathetic toward us. Naomi asked the question, where'd you glean today? Where'd you work? Ruth answers, the name of the man I worked with today is Boaz. Interesting how Boaz, the name is Boaz, is kept till the end. His name is Boaz. As soon as the name of Boaz is mentioned, Naomi comes right back and said, the Lord bless him. And she also said, he has not stopped showing us his kindness to the living and the dead. Now, we have to clarify this passage a little bit at this point. It is Boaz that Ruth blesses when she said, the Lord bless him. It's the Lord bless Boaz. That is very clear. But when she said, he has not stopped showing us his kindness to the living and the dead, who is blessing here? Is it God who's blessing, or is it Boaz who's blessing the living and the dead? It is very vague in NIV. He has not stopped showing his kindness to the living and the dead. But listen to the King James Version. Blessed be he of the Lord who hath not left of his kindness the living to the dead. And listen to NASB. May he be blessed of the Lord, that is Boaz. Blessed be the Lord who has not withheld his kindness to the living and to the dead. Now we realize who here describes the Lord. In King James and also NASB, they did that purposely. King James Version and NASB seems to suggest, in fact, their understanding it is God who blesses the living and the dead. It is God who blesses. Now, Naomi knows Boaz well. As soon as she realized that it is Boaz who has shown mercy to Ruth, mercy and grace, and was very generous to Ruth, she said, the Lord bless him. The Lord bless Boaz. But Naomi doesn't stop there. Naomi doesn't stop at blessing. She confesses the Lord has not withheld his kindness to the living and to the dead. The living here is Naomi and Ruth. The dead here is Elimelech, Naomi's husband, and the 2 sons. Why is she saying that? Why is she saying that? It is because as soon as she realized, as soon as she heard the name of Boaz, she realized the invisible helping hands of God. As soon as she realized and she heard the name of Boaz, she realized the unending, unceasing grace of God. You know, Naomi thought the grace of God toward her ceased, ended, and was no longer. Saying, Almighty has made my life very bitter. The Lord has afflicted me. She thought, God no longer loves me. God no longer cares for me. But when she heard the name of Boaz and how Boaz showed his generosity to Ruth and has shown his mercy to Ruth, she recognized how wrong she was, thinking the grace of God was stopped, has ceased. She realized the continual, the unending, unceasing grace of God in her life. That God has never stopped loving her. God has never stopped caring for her. You know, we are looking at Joseph these days in our morning QT in book of Genesis. You know, Joseph was sold to Egypt by his brothers. His brothers betrayed him and they sold him to Egypt. He was in prison unjustly because of Potiphar's wife. We all know the story. And in the prison, cupbearer of Pharaoh did not remember him, though Joseph interpreted his dream and he was restored to the cupbearer position in Pharaoh's court. He did not remember Joseph and forgot about him. You know, Joseph could have very easily said, you know what, where is the grace of God in my life? That God no longer loves him. God no longer cares for him. He could have very said that easily. God's grace ceased in my life. But did God's grace for Joseph end? Did he cease? No, not at all. God, in his time, he turned things around completely. He lifted up Joseph. And God showed his unending and unceasing grace to Joseph. God was with him. God was always with him. Joseph was always in the midst of God's grace. You know, church, God's grace toward us is an unceasing grace. Sometimes you question the grace of God, especially when the things are not going well, when the things are hard, tough. But when we realize the unceasing, unending grace of God, that's when we can be thankful. That's when we get closer. That's when we grow and mature. You know, we're in the midst of a revival meeting here in Tampa. And I'm having an opportunity to spend much time with a guest speaker over many meals. And he said this, among many other things. He says, COVID-19 has revealed the truth about the Korean churches. Ooh. the true spiritual condition of many Korean churches. Wow. And he said the Korean churches needs to go through, listen to this, greater hardships than COVID-19. Ooh. The churches need to go through greater hardships than COVID-19. Why? Why is he saying that? Does he hate Korean churches? Does he not want the Korean churches to prosper and do well? Does he wish the malice for the Korean churches? No, not at all. That's not why. What he's saying is this: the church will grow and mature through difficulties and hardship. Church, along with the Christians, along with the people. The church of God will see the true, unending grace, unceasing grace of God through difficulties and hardships. We will see the unending, unceasing grace of God through difficulties and hardships of our lives. You know, there's a song titled "Do It Again" by Elevation Worship. We know the song. The lyrics goes like this: walking around these walls, I thought by now they would fall, but you have never failed me yet. Waiting for change to come, knowing the battle's won, for you have never failed me yet. The song speaks of unending, unceasing grace of God. Situation is not easy. Things at a point of break, at the point of changes. That means changes are hard, it is difficult. But there's never ending, never ceasing grace of God. You know, we know the beloved hymn titled "It Is Well Within My Soul." And when you look at the song or the hymn, surprisingly, it is very surprisingly, the hymn begins with this: when peace like a river attendeth my way. Why am I saying it is surprise? Why am I saying that I'm surprised to see the song begins with such words? Because the situation of the writer of the hymn was nothing like peace like a river. It was nothing like that. In fact, Horatio Spafford, his life was shattered when he wrote this hymn. In 1871, he lost his 4-year-old son to pneumonia. That very year, he lost most of businesses due to the Great Chicago Fire. A couple years later, in 1873, he and his family, 4 daughters and his wife, planned a Europe vacation. He sent them off ahead of them so that he can meet there. He can take care of a couple of things and he can meet them in Europe. But the ship that was carrying his family, 4 daughters and his wife, was in collision in the middle of the sea. And the 4 daughters died and the wife survived. She sent them a telegram, said, "Saved alone, what shall I do?" Saved alone. Whoa, what a message. What a telegram. Horatio Spafford got on a ship to meet his wife. And at the precise location where the other ship crashed and he lost his 4 daughters, he wrote this hymn beginning with, listen to, "When peace like a river attendeth my way." Wow, that's not the situation that he was in. But the very next words are like this: "When sorrows like sea billows roll." And he goes, "Whatever my lot, thou hast taught me to say, it is well within my soul." He says, it is well. When things are not well, when things are not fine, when things are hard and difficult, that's when he remembered. That's when he remembered unending, unceasing grace of God. Sometimes in our difficulties and hardship, we ask the question, why do these things happen to me? Why not everyone else? But why only me? Granted, our situation is difficult. It is hard. But that's when we need to see the grace of God in our lives. Not anything else. But that's when we need to see the grace of God. That's when we need to see the unending, unceasing grace of God. And that's what Naomi is seeing right now in today's text. She thought God did not love her anymore. She thought God did not care anymore. But all of a sudden, she sees the leading and guiding hands of God. She realized the grace of God has never left her. That's when she exclaims, He has not stopped showing His kindness to the living and the dead. He has not stopped at all. It continued on. Beloved, see God working in your life. See God's invisible hands of working in your life. See the unending, unceasing grace of God. Then we'll be able to thank God. And we'll be able to thank others who became the channel of blessing, who God placed them to be the channel of blessings in our lives. See the unending, unceasing grace of God.